and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and on today's TSS I have two guests. First guest is Will Parchman. You probably know Will from his time at TopDrawSoccer.com and maybe even from the Top Draw Soccer Show podcast. Will helped me preview Tuesday night's game where the US plays Trinidad and Tobago away, and we talked about how the US should and or might line up for the game. Just so we're all very clear, the US needs to win to absolutely guarantee World Cup qualification, but a draw would probably do it thanks to our goal difference. Basically, don't lose to Trinidad, but also try and win just to make sure. The game is on both beIN Sports and Universo, and it's an 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff. And I think it actually is an 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff in this case. Will and I also talk some US under-17s, plus the national team futures of Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie. Second guest on today's show is none other than Taylor Rockwell himself. Taylor joins me in part 2 for a US national team themed Ruffneck Scarves ad read. Get 20% off at ruffneckscarves.com with discount code Total Soccer Show, all one word, by the way, and some really good updates from the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network. Okay, enough from me, on with the show. So on the phone, I have my former colleague, sort of, Will Parchman. Hello.
How's it going, Daryl?
It's pretty good. There were, 6 glorious weeks where we kind of worked together at Top Draw Soccer on the Top Draw Soccer Show.
They were the 6 most glorious weeks in podcasting history. I feel confident in saying that.
And I assume that working with me and Taylor is what eventually drove you away.
Yeah, I just couldn't do it. I was like, another British guy in American soccer. I just can't handle it. I've got to retire now.
Taking all our jobs. So, yeah, before we're going to talk US, we're going to talk Trinidad, we're going to talk U17s. I'm really excited to talk to you about all those things. But first I want to talk about, it's been, maybe 2 months since you sort of left the day-to-day writing about soccer to spend day-to-day not writing about soccer, but I assume you're still following everything that's going on. I mean, this podcast is going to fail miserably if you haven't, so I'm sort of assuming that. So I'm wondering, what has it changed things for you? Because I'm really conscious of the idea of you can take a thing you love and turn it into work, and kind of that's not as much fun as just sitting back and watching and not having to write. I think you wrote like 100 columns a day for Top Draw Soccer. Is that right?
Yeah, there are a few. No, I think analogies kind of fail me, but I think, it's when you're in it and you're doing it, there's a love, but there's also the sort of a duty that, even if it's like 70-30, you love to do it, but you have to do it. I think, that 30 gets stripped away, and it's all the, if you're watching, if you get time, it's, 100% you're watching because you want to watch it. And you're watching because it's, what you want to do and you've got time to do it. And so I think that, the fact that, I can sit down and just make snarky comments on Twitter.
Yeah, your Twitter has been on fire the last few weeks.
I think that's just because I don't have to worry about anybody sending me an email and saying, hey, we heard from so and so, and I think we're gonna have to ask you to cut that out. No,
I did hear there were some DMs out there that you were going to sort of auction off.
Yeah, I think it's still a little close. I think when the said party retires, I think I'll feel confident, and even then, I feel like they'll come to my house and with a hatchet and have words.
You'd have to go into witness protection, it sounds like.
Yeah, I already kind of feel like I have to, but it'll be worse then.
So how did you watch the US Panama game, and how are you watching the US Trinidad game? Are you a guy that if you're not working, do you go to a bar and watch it, or are you the guy that sits alone in front of his TV? I mean, I'll be honest, I'm more of the latter than the former, often with Taylor, but if I'm on my own, I'm sort of watching it on my own and not surrounded by people drinking.
Yeah, I've always been like, I want to be, and this goes beyond soccer, but I've always been like, put me in a dark room by myself so I can like be alone with my demons, because I don't want to share those with the world. I've gotten better about it. I mean, I can come and go. I mean, I'll watch on tape delay or, find a stream somewhere, just because my schedule now is like, it's a corporate 9 to 5. So if it's during the day, I don't have time, but I can come home and be the guy that untucks his button-down shirt and has the family around and kind of sit down with a beer and watch the game and not have to worry about doing player ratings or anything afterward.
Right, you can just enjoy the pleasures of the hex.
Yeah, let the snark roll.
Yeah. So, speaking of the pleasures of the Hex, I assume you enjoyed this past Friday against Panama.
Yes. Oh, the Pulisic was running wild and free. It's a beautiful thing.
He sure was, right?
Yeah.
I thought of you when Altidore scored, was heavily involved. And I thought of you, the column that you wrote. It's going back to at least where Klinsmann was still the coach, where you talked about the unrelenting polarization around Josie Altidore. So I wanted to kind of hit that first because I thought that article for Top Drawer Soccer framed it really well. Is the fact that some people will just always look for the negatives almost, and it's often his goal scoring record, and there's more to him than that. And I kind of feel like we saw that this past Friday.
Yeah, I think there will never be a consensus on Josie. I think he's just reached the boiling point to where you're either a Josie guy or you're not, which, I mean, we can go into detail about why that's like a microcosm for politics in this country to begin with, but, right. Stick to sports. So that's what we'll do. No, but I think that, objectively you've got to hand him some praise because, when he's at his worst, Josie is sort of unmoored to the attack. He's not really building into that sort of shoulder, the off shoulder guy who's really trying to push the line and stay in the box. And really, I mean, I don't think he really views himself as a number 9, as brutish and bruising as he is. I don't think he's ever really felt like, in his own mind that's who he is. I think he's sort of a jack of all trades forward as he thinks of himself. And so that comes out. But I think when he's at his best, he's mentally closest to that number 9. And I think you can parse that out over his career. I mean, I think, if somebody ever did this study, you go to his games where he scored one or multiple goals, every single one of those games, he's probably gotten most or all of his touches in the 18. And that's certainly the case against Panama. He was really locked in near the goal. And I think when he does that, he's pretty much unstoppable. Is
it fair to say that he's always better with a partner? And if so, is Bobby Wood the right guy? Because it kind of looked like it Friday, I think, especially on second viewing.
Yeah, and I think he was that way and is that way with TFC. I think you put Giovinco next to him, and his TFC form is kind of puzzling because he tends to being the guy that drops deeper than Giovinco, which doesn't seem to make any sense, but it works for them somehow.
It's the inverse big man, small man relationship.
Yeah, I think it just confuses defenses and they just explode mentally and they fall down. But I think the way it works with the U.S. is good because I think both Bobby and Josie have the ability to step up and fall back at will, and that confuses center backs because they don't know who to step with and who's going to make the late run. And so I think that'll work. And I think that'll probably be, with Bruce's predilection for the 4-4-2, that'll be the way it is barring injury in the World Cup. I think Panama, if nothing else, cemented that for Bruce in my mind. I think he's decided that that's the way he wants to go, which is fine. It just puts a little bit of pressure on that central midfield if you want Pulisic to sort of be a runner, which is basically what he's going to have to be.
So this is the thing I want to get to is the Trinidad game, which is coming up Tuesday night away to Trinidad. It's, as I understand it, it's like basically a draw is probably good enough, but a win obviously seals the deal. So that's what we're looking for. Do you expect or do you hope that Arena goes with 2 up front and Pulisic in behind away to Trinidad, which would, as I've looked back at the formations, and it would be a first for an away game in the Hex for Bruce to do that this go round. He's normally gone a little more conservative each time.
I would be shocked if we saw the same lineup that we did against Panama. And the reason why, I don't know if you saw, but Shaka Hislop had a tweet where he was like, I don't know if everybody knows, but this time of year in TNT, it's the rainy season, and anything can happen. It might be ugly, and the pitch is going to be all torn up, and it's not going to be beautiful soccer. And so,
did you see the photos today?
I didn't.
Oh, so there were photos from I've forgotten his name. He's the sprinter. Atto Bolden Stadium, which is where they're playing.
Yes.
There was kind of a moat around the field, and they had a water pump pulling it out. And US Soccer were tweeting some video of some of the coaching staff were having to. It was kind of hilarious. They were giving the players piggybacks across the water so that they could get to the part of the field, because it was their training session, that was dry without getting their cleats wet.
Beautiful.
So that does mean, and I could see there's a bit of video they posted. You could really see, the turf tearing up, just as you said. So that suggests that tomorrow night, Tuesday night, is going to be soggy and probably cutting up quite a lot. So just to confirm what you're saying, that the field will not be pleasant.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd enjoy it. I'd put slide tackles all over that thing, but
yeah. Where's Jermaine Jones when you need him?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know what I think would be interesting, and I don't know that Bruce is adventurous enough to try this, and I don't even know that I would do it if I was coach. But what about putting Pulisic as a second forward and just have him dropping in, and then having like an actual, something closer to a 6 or to an 8 next to Bradley, and then having harken back to the days of Bob Bradley's empty bucket. This is not a game where I will die on the hill of my stylistic preferences.
Yeah, no, this is a game to just get the job done and get qualified.
Yeah, you got to get a point and get out. And so TNT's got the horses to beat you on long balls, and they can poach one. And I think what Bruce said today about I'd like to see one of these European big boys come in and try and CONCACAF. It's a very Bruce quote, but there's something to it. You go on the road in CONCACAF and anything can happen. So
I feel like that quote would be a lot better if only the top 1 or 2 in the hex qualified. When it's 3.5 out of 6, it's a bit easier.
I think the Netherlands would like those odds.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I mean,
they'd still finish 6th though.
Burn. You're probably right though. No, but I think that. I mean, who knows? Pulisic might go with that sort of pseudo 10 role again, which I think would be fine because he runs enough. He's gonna get kicked no matter what. But I don't know. I mean, putting him at that second striker spot, it tickles my fancy.
So would he be kind of like the Giovinco replacement as Jose's partner, and maybe Bobby Wood has to sit out, or you can do the same thing with Wood and Pulisic?
Exactly.
But I feel like Josie has seniority, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah. Josie goes where Josie wants. But like Giovinco was a 10 in Italy. I mean, he actually was quite good for a while. He had a really good run of form and sort of found his second life here as sort of a pseudo forward. So like those positions actually aren't as far off as some people think. I mean, a lot of the duties are the same, especially when you're on the road trying to dig out a point. So, I mean, I don't think we'll ever see it. I just think it would be really interesting in a sort of a strange must-win kind of game, or must-draw, I guess.
So that means you're adding a sort of an extra, a more central midfielder to partner Michael Bradley. Who is your choice? Is it Dax? Is it Kellen Acosta? Is it Alejandro Bedoya?
I think Kellen is an interesting choice there. I think a lot of people would say, Bedoya there just because of his work rate. I don't think he provides you enough conflict avoidance. I think he sort of passes into trouble sometimes. He's not a distributor. He's not really going to help you get out of trouble so much as he's just going to hound the ball and force turnovers, which is fine. And then Dax, I think, is too deep. I think that's too much of a deep option. And then you're going to force Bradley to sort of step up and connect, and you won't have any connection. So I think Kellen is a good sort of middle ground there. The question is just whether, his mentality is right for a game this big. He's had a few sort of mediocre letdowns in big games before in a U.S. shirt. So there's that question. But
I feel like it's ever since he started talking about that move to Europe, his form has fallen off for US and a little bit for Dallas from what I've seen.
Interesting point.
Mm-hmm. You're not one eye across the Atlantic, maybe.
Yeah, you're not wrong though. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll see it, but I think that would be a really interesting wrinkle.
Do you see Benny Feilhaber getting in there? Because I feel like it was a really interesting select. It was kind of the big surprise, the surprise inclusion. Let's put it that way. On this roster, the big surprise was Fabian Johnson. But I wondered if Benny Feilhaber is the type of guy and the type of player that you call up not to use.
I think that's exactly it. And I think, which is interesting because Benny does not have a reputation as a locker room guy, like at all.
Right.
So I don't think he would have been called up specifically to not play, but I do think that with Pulisic's move central, I think Feilhaber's role becomes a lot more confusing. So unless Pulisic gets pushed out wide, which doesn't seem likely with Nagbe and Areola both, starring in a 4-0 blowout, Feilhaber just sort of becomes, sort of maybe a late game addition if you're trying to throw everything forward and you want to pull off one of your, your defensive guys. But other than that, I think he's surplus.
Oh, so maybe you call him like he's the Feilhaber safe. If we're struggling at the end, you break glass and then he comes out.
I missed this.
One other thing on actually two other things on selection. I saw a couple of I think it was Stephen Goff tweeted that he'd heard that Pulisic had a sore calf and was still hurting from basically the beating Panama put on him, and it made me wonder if it was worth sending him out against Trinidad on that rough field, because it's like a must get result World Cup qualifier. You just throw your best pieces at them, even if they're a little bit beaten up. Or is it wiser to maybe just keep him out and see if we can get the job done early on without him?
Oh yeah, you got to play him. I don't think there's any question.
Even if he's hurting.
I
can see it.
I mean, it's a question, I guess, of how much he's hurting. If he's able to go, if he's able to play at even like 80%, I think, you get into a situation where, let's say the U.S. loses and it's because, they didn't really have a spark in the middle and, the U.S. is sort of left on the outs, and all of a sudden we're like, well, why didn't he play Pulisic? And so I think the risk is there either way, but I think the risk of missing a World Cup outweighs the risk of playing Pulisic on 80%, on 90%, whatever it is.
That makes sense. I'll buy that logic.
But like I said, it depends on, if a doctor's telling you he can't go, then you got to sit him. But, if it's a, iffy thing, I think you got to play him.
One other thing, Matt Doyle wrote a column for MLSsoccer.com today, and he was pointing to the same thing you mentioned, which is, Trinidad, from what we've seen, they'll probably go quite direct, which is how they scored against Mexico at the Azteca. I think it was a Levi Garcia flick on and Winchester scored. And Matt Doyle's suggestion was that maybe this was the game to go back three, but not in that fun way where everybody wants to go back three so they can get like Yedlin pushed all the way up, but more go back three so we've got three centre-backs and we're definitely going to win all those headers.
I wouldn't play that way until late. I would use a sub on that. So obviously that's a formation they've practiced. Yeah. Bruce has said that before. They practiced it for the Mexico game. So they know it, which is good. I don't think they know it. They 90 minutes know it in a big game. I don't feel comfortable, and I don't think Bruce feels comfortable rolling it out in a way that requires you to build attacks, that requires you to play. They can't just bunker for 90 minutes. And I think with this particular team, with this particular makeup, that's a bunker formation. They can't really play out of it.
So you think it'd be more like the 5-4-1 that we went to the Azteca with?
Exactly. I think it turns into sort of a brick 5 across back line. And, Yedlin may bomb up every now and then, but it just sort of ends up being cement, and I think it sort of drags them down. And that's fine, I guess, but they're not really going to produce anything out of it. And I would be shocked, honestly, if they scored beyond just like a howler from TNT. So I think what we'll see is the 4-4-2 or some approximation, and then a late sub on, maybe a midfielder for a center back or something, and then they'll sort of switch into that. I see. All
right, just thinking about Trinidad for a second, because I feel like we haven't given them much attention because so much focus was on that Panama game, in the build-up to this pair of qualifiers. Is there anyone on that Trinidad team that you are particularly worried about from a US perspective?
So I'm not worried about Jovan Jones. He never seems to show up internationally. Obviously, he's had a couple good games, but I think the fact that he's bounced mostly between fullback for on the club level and then midfield for TNT, I think has really sort of, I don't know if it's confused him, but it just doesn't really seem to be the same level of effectiveness when he's not overlapping. And so he's never really worried me on the international stage. But I will say that Kevin Molino always seems to be in the back of my mind. And it's not necessarily
bleach blonde hair.
Yeah. I mean, you could see him too. But it's not necessarily because he shows up every game, because he definitely doesn't. He's very flighty. But when he does show up, it's almost like just Jordan out there, and you're like, where did this guy come from? He hits a heater. And so, I mean, he's technical enough. He's never really seemed to me to live into his technical ability quite as much as he could. But when he does, he can, one-on-one, he can beat any defender that we have. So if he can work into space on one of those quick breaks that we were talking about, there's no defender that we have that will be able to keep up with him.
All right, so that's definitely someone to keep an eye on. Do you know a lot about Levi Garcia?
I don't. I don't.
So he's a teenage winger who's been playing for, I believe, RZ in the Netherlands. And I think he's been sort of, especially towards the end of the Hex, as they've got a bit more experimental, shall we say, they've started bringing Levi Garcia in all the time. And I haven't seen much of him either, except for a few YouTube highlights. And he looks like a kind of dangerous, dribbly, attacking winger. And I think he played on the left, against Mexico. So I'm not sure which side he'll end up playing, but it'll be a good challenge for, say, Villafana and DeAndre Yedlin.
Yeah, and what's funny is that Trinidad and Tobago really doesn't have much of a presence on the CONCACAF U stage, so like the U17 and U20 teams. They don't do a whole lot. So I think it's fun that they've obviously produced an attacking talent. They seem to come out with like a huge European guy like once every 5, 6, 7 years. So hopefully
and it's kind of, we've never heard about him until suddenly he's like on a Dutch team and playing for the national team. That kind
of tends to be how it happens. So hopefully he'll score a goal and Pulisic will score 5.
that'll work nicely for me.
How about that? Yeah.
So are you feeling confident or not?
I mean, what is confidence these days? It just seems so flighty with this team. I mean, I've felt this way, forever, that this team could beat anybody and lose to anybody, and I feel less confident that they could beat anybody now since the Confed Cup days of yore. But I feel like certainly that's the case in CONCACAF. I mean, this team could beat anybody 4-0, and they could lose to anybody, as we saw with Costa Rica last year 4-0. So I would be surprised if they didn't get a result. I think it'll be. I feel like every TNT game, it's like we go down 1-0 and then you score once in like the last 10 minutes, and then it's like, oh my gosh, any point in CONCACAF is worth it, and you're like, well, if we keep doing this, we're gonna lose. So I think they'll get a draw. I think they'll work it out and squeak through, and everything will be fine.
The one thing that still worries me is I feel like because the US hasn't failed to qualify in so long, that it just feels inconceivable. To quote Wallace Shawn, but just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it can't happen. You know what I'm saying?
See, you're sort of building up that like, I don't think it can happen, and I'm over here like preparing for doomsday. So I think that's just our contrasting personality styles.
Are you building a bunker over there?
I am. I got my dehydrated foods and ready for the riots.
Well, how about we put our faith in the future? Because this very morning, the US Under-17s beat Ghana 1-0. Goal from Ayo Akinyola, assist from Chris Goslin, starting with a tackle at midfield from Chris Durkin. Did you get to see much of this? I'm assuming maybe you couldn't watch the whole game.
I did. I couldn't watch the whole thing, but as you know, I am play your kids for life. So yeah. I had to watch. I watched some of it. I certainly caught the goal and caught. I caught enough of the last 2 games to feel like, these kids are doing enough at the very least.
So, do you like what you're seeing, or are you thinking maybe you're expecting more? Like, where are you at with this?
I can't really complain. They get 6 points from 2 games and, win the first one comfortably and the second one, against Ghana, which is always a tough team to play in U17, U20 terms, just because they're so fast, comparatively speaking. But, I think that it seems to be this pattern, and it's happened in each of the last, couple U17 World Cups, especially, where these teams sort of play this like beautiful flowing style for a lot of the cycle, especially against big teams, and then they get into the World Cup and it's almost like a deer in the headlights a little bit, which is, to be expected. These are kids, but
didn't you tweet something to this effect? You said, I can't understand why every time a US team gets to a tournament, they kind of clam up a bit.
Yeah, and it's not just U17s. I mean, it's across the board. It's certainly the senior team does the same thing. But I think, I mean, it's just the stage. You know, it's to be expected to some degree. But I think at a certain point, I mean, this team was playing some like I watched this team do a 19-pass buildup, you know, from end line to end line and score this ridiculous goal against Portugal. And like, where is that? I mean, it's not present at this tournament, even against India. Which they obviously beat by a lot, but not the way they have been. So it's been good. I mean, I can't complain too much, but certainly if we're going to hold this group to a higher standard, as I think we should, then hopefully we'll see a little bit more.
And I mentioned Chris Durkin kind of starting the move. I don't know I don't know how you watched it or what channel you saw it through, but I saw him appear from off screen, like as if by magic, and just make this sort of pounce of a tackle. Right, he's like a cat. And then I saw him kind of battle a little bit because he was down after the tackle. Right, he battles, comes up with the ball, and then Chris Gosling starts running really cleverly, and Durkin spots him. And just for a moment, it really felt like a team that was sort of a really effective, I want to say counter-attacking machine, but that's not. I guess counter-pressing is probably a better word, right? Because they won the ball quite high up the field. And I really thought I saw for a second the style that Tab Ramos was going for with the U20s, and I saw it with the U17s, and I thought I might be seeing the US national team style of play.
No question. And I think that Tab Ramos, you know, if you say anything about his tenure as the youth technical director, it's that, you know, his concepts, you know, who he is, has really bled into, you know, the U17, especially U17 and U20 teams, just because they are just dogged in the middle of the field. I mean, just everywhere. I think you've seen that in each of the last couple World Cups, and, you know, that these teams just never quit in the middle. And I think that they have Chris Durkin. You know, obviously he started this tournament at center back, where he had been playing quite a bit for John Hackworth, and moved up to the number 6, which I mean, that's his spot. I mean, that's where he's going to play. And I think it showed. You know, he was just everywhere. I think he's such an enticing prospect, and part of the reason why I think people are so confused as why he hasn't gotten really any run out with DC is he's a DC kind of player. I mean, he's scrappy. He gets in the mix. You know, he does a lot of the dirty work, and he's a great passer. And I think he has as much potential as Carleton, you know, as Timmy Way, as Josh Sargent. Even I would put him in that same. In that same block. It's just a matter of, you know, getting him the opportunities. I
think it's just less of a YouTube-y skill set, though, right? Yep. Because no one's going to make a YouTube video of Chris Durkin's interceptions.
Yep. He's definitely hamstrung by his position, but he's about as sexy a player as a defensive midfielder can be.
Yeah, right. It just depends what you're into, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm into that. So,
well, the US needs that, right? They need sort of a strong defensive midfielder going forward. I'm not suggesting that Durkin goes and plays for the US national team immediately after this, but I have seen him. So he's been down on loan here at the Richmond Kickers, playing in the USL this season between U17 duties. But I did see you tweet at DC United when they said Durkin's the man. I think you tweeted, why not play him then? Or something. Yeah. So do you see a chance for Chris Durkin specifically, but maybe also, you know, Andrew Carleton or Ayo Akinyola at Toronto? Do you see a chance for any of these guys to get meaningful Major League Soccer minutes in 2018?
You know what's interesting to me is when guys have a U17 World Cup coming up and they sign contracts like months beforehand. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's interesting because this is the, certainly more so than the U20 World Cup, this is the preeminent youth scouting event in the world, period.
Right.
Every 2 years, there are more eyes on the U17 World Cup for scouting purposes than there are in literally any other event on Earth. And, you know, you can count up the dozens and dozens of players that made high-profile moves to like Arsenal and, PSG on the back of U17 World Cup time. So I think it's just interesting that, you know, a couple of guys decided to sign right before. But
so Josh Sargent being an example, right? Didn't he? Like, I don't think he officially signed because he can't until he's 18, but it was there's a contract waiting to be signed, and there's definitely a commitment to Werder Bremen.
Which I think is fine for him specifically, because I think they had been working on that for a while, and that's something that that they probably would have signed in 3 to 6 months. But I mean, specifically the MLS guys who maybe haven't gotten the exposure, and then they sign with their hometown club, and then come U17 World Cup, it's like, oh well, Bayern wanted to say, hey, but you signed, right. So oh well, that's too bad. So
and then there's the sort of labyrinth of Major League Soccer outgoing transfers. Even if Bayern was super determined, they might sort of look at the number of people they have to talk to and the paperwork they'd have to go through and the negotiations they'd have to do with league and club and then player, and they might just be like, nah, we'll wait.
So two contrasting stories. I mean, you look at Haji Wright, who decided to completely bypass MLS and go to the New York Cosmos, and 100% the only reason he did that was so he had a runway to Europe, because he wasn't 18 yet. And contrast that with Eric Palmer Brown, who basically had to fight tooth and nail to get out of SKC and had to sort of go through this weird loophole. And he never played for Sporting KC, and it was like, why not? And all of a sudden, now he's on his way. So if you look at those two, I think most people would agree that Haji did it the easier way, by completely sort of bypassing MLS. And the reason is just because once MLS gets its claws in you, it's extremely difficult just with the rules, and it's just sort of arcane. Most European clubs, honestly, I talked to a bunch, they just don't want to deal with it. I mean, it's just too much. And it's a global game. They can get players from anywhere. So why jump through the hoops when we can just go to Africa or Eastern Europe or South America or wherever, and it's just 100 times easier.
Is there anything? This is kind of putting you on the spot, but is there anything MLS could do that wasn't sort of blowing up the system to make that a little bit easier? Like, say if someone did want to come in for Andrew Carleton, like he hasn't really lit up this tournament so far, but it's only 2 games in and he has scored already, right? So I know the guys where you work are gathering around the water cooler talking about his hot and cold form.
So interested.
But is there anything MLS could do to kind of smooth the path for players who do want to leave at a young age?
So the only thing that I could think of that would make any lasting impact would be total decentralization, where MLS gives up the rights to the contracts, the individual clubs, because then it becomes less about the league defending its players, because it wants the league perception to be better, it wants the league to be better from the bottom up, which, I mean, that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. But that necessarily limits the movement of the players, because it's not what the club or the player wants, it's what the league wants. And this would be the same anywhere in the world. I mean, if the FA controlled the Premier League, they'd want to keep everybody home. Not that a ton of people are looking to leave, but
luckily all the English guys are too scared to leave England.
Yeah, maybe that was not the greatest example, but
Jadon Sancho. Shout out to Jadon Sancho.
Yeah. So I think that what would do it is if you gave that control over the clubs and let the clubs decide what to do with those contracts, even if you gerrymandered it in a very MLS-y kind of way, where the league technically still owns the rights, but the clubs own what they do with those rights. So I don't know how they would work that out, but finding a way to put the ultimate final decision in the club's hands instead of the league's hands, that also puts the decision in the players' hands more so. So that would help, I think.
That would be the most MLS way to do it, right? Because I don't think
the league rules.
Yeah, the league would never actually sort of give up control of the teams because it has it, so why would they ever give it up, right? I mean, at least sort of in the short term. I'm going to say pretty much in our lifetimes, I can't see them at least wanting to do that. They could maybe be forced to do that. It would almost be like it would have to be like a false freedom for the clubs to have access to selling the players in some way.
Yeah, it's like when we came up with an idea for Pro Rel, sort of like attaching the USL onto it. So it's pro, but we called it Faux Rel. It's like nothing with MLS is like truly 100% the way it seems. It's they have to sort of gerrymander in rules to make it work. But it's sort of about perception, and every time they do something weird with a rule, everyone's like, that's so MLS. So I think, as long as the perception is that players have the freedom of movement, and as long as the perception is that they're choosing where they want to go, then, you're making steps, at least, as small as they may seem.
This is a players' union thing as well, isn't it? They'd have to get real tough to start demanding something like that.
Yeah, and I remember I was in the locker room after a Sounders game, and it was right after the last conversation between the last discussions between the players and the owners.
CBA negotiations.
Yeah, the last time they did the CBA, and Brad Evans is in there, and he was like one of the main spokesmen, and he was just, he was like, we did what we could do. I mean, we have no leverage. There's nothing like, it's not like the NBA where, we really had a whole lot of chips to play with, and it was like everybody was at the players because they felt like they didn't get enough, but like they did, they pretty much went to the table with nothing and didn't come away with much else. So hopefully
they got free agency for Brad Davis, right?
That's they got free agency for like 4 dudes over the age of 45.
Oh, okay. To the future. I've been wanting to talk to you about Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams. I know you were a big fan of both. I think I read something you wrote about Tyler Adams quite a while back and kind of agreed. I'm sort of really on board that hype train. I wonder if you think that, assuming the US qualifies, like assuming you don't have to go in the bunker and the US does qualify for the World Cup this Tuesday, is there a chance that guys like McKennie and Adams get a shot with the US first team, senior team, between now and the World Cup?
That's a tough one. I don't think there's any chance for Tyler Adams, sad as it is. I just don't think. I think Bruce is a radar guy, and I think he's got a radar, and I don't think Tyler's really on it. I don't think he's like Klinsmann would do things where like, what the hell was that call? You know what I mean? Like, it was like, where did that, even, Julian Green had sort of been on the radar, but you were like, wow, that okay. He called him in. That's okay.
Miguel Ibarra was one that seems that way too.
Yeah. Remember Ventura Alvarado?
Yes. Yeah. Several times.
Yeah. It was, unfortunately. But there's a lot of like randomness with Klinsmann, and there really isn't much with Bruce. He's very much a grandpa in that way. Like he's got his guys, and but that said, I do think there's a chance for Weston McKennie. I think he's been in the system long enough. The problem, and this is conspiracy theory stuff, but the problem for Weston, in my opinion, is that former coach Richie Williams is on the bench for Bruce, and Richie Williams coached the U17 team when Weston was eligible, and Weston was clearly one of the 20 best players, and he wasn't picked. So he has had similar problems getting into the U20 team. Wasn't picked for the U20 World Cup, and now Richie Williams is an assistant for Bruce. So who knows how much of an ear Richie has, how much of Bruce's ear he has, but certainly, there was something there. I mean, it's almost, it's like Haji Wright, he has been on fire with Schalke, with Schalke's, U19 team now that, he's loaned out, but, no call-ups. I can't find a single call-up for him in 2 years, and that doesn't make any sense. So, who knows what's going on behind closed doors, with these discussions, but I think Weston's good enough to be, the final 25, 26, and then we'll see what happens with the cut down. But you never know with sort of some of the discussions.
But it's got to be that those Bundesliga performances, which I've been watching every time he's played. It's now 3 or 4 games now. To me, he's looked very, very impressive. Like, Bruce Arena must have watched that at some point, right? So, and I'd like to think logically that if there is some beef with Richie Williams, at some point Arena has to watch that performance and be like, yeah, okay, but we're still calling him in.
Yeah, I
want to see for myself.
That's our logic, but I think
right.
Bruce's logic might be a little bit different, to where, he's certainly open to playing young kids. I think I've heard a perception that he's like, an old man's coach, and I don't think that's true.
No, he gave Pulisic the keys to the car, right? And he called in Roldan, and he's called in some young kids.
I mean, and he did, he was there with Landon early on, and he played a lot of the kids from that 99 U17 World Cup team at the, in the following years. So
he's still playing DeMarcus Beasley.
Still playing those 99 guys. So I don't think there's a ton to that. But I do think, like I said, he's a radar guy, and it's like he's got his own radar and he's got his own way of viewing guys. And I think he's a big locker room guy, which is something that, the players clearly appreciate with after Klinsmann just sort of torched it. So I think, Bruce is big on chemistry, and he's big on, having the right puzzle pieces, and bringing in a, 19, and I think he's a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
It probably won't mess with it, but will it help it? I don't know. I think he'll be just as inclined to call in a guy like Wando, who he knows it will never play, but, like Mix in 2014, but, he thinks that he's pleasant enough. He's savvy enough. He's smart enough to, help the guys in lineup drills and, in the locker room. And so I think that's the way Bruce tends to think, but, we've been surprised before.
I've got one more question about Tyler Adams, just because I'm on that hype train. I've seen floating around this idea that maybe he should sort of think about going the right back route and less the midfield route, because he's been playing sort of right back, right wing back for New York Red Bulls. And I wondered, because you've watched him for a while, right? I wondered if you had any opinion on whether we should be thinking about him as a midfielder and not even thinking about like doing the Kellen Acosta thing where we temporarily played him fullback for the national team to fill a hole, or is that worth a go at some point in the future?
Yeah, we're Americans, so we think anybody can play fullback, unfortunately. But he's not a fullback, he shouldn't be a fullback. And I think the only reason he's playing fullback with the Red Bulls is because it fits their scheme and it fits what they're doing.
But is he not a fullback because he's missing something that you need to play fullback, or is he not a fullback because he's so good that he should be in the center of the field?
The latter. I mean, he's too influential to stash in a corner, basically. Like he actually, the first time I actually saw him play was at fullback for the U17 team. And I thought he was good. I didn't think he didn't blow me away. He's tidy on the ball. He kept guys in front of him and all that. But once he moved to midfield, I was like, this kid is running the game. And I don't know how anybody who watched the U20s beat Mexico for the first time in like 29 years earlier this year watched him just completely destroy Mexico's skilled midfield. I don't know how to look at that and think, yeah, let's stash him away at right back. And we tend to think that way on the next level. Like, yeah, he did it against U20s, but he's a little bit smaller, and this is where I pull out the Conte comparisons and be like, yeah, well, so is Conte. He's what 5'8", 5'9", something like that, and he's a bulldog. So I think Adams is just too good. He's too influential, and he's too all action. He wants to get sideline to sideline. He's too good, basically, to be a fullback.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing.
Anytime.
Anything else you want to talk about before we sign off here? We've covered everything I wanted to cover in, I want to say, pretty fast time, but also in good detail, which is one of the reasons I love talking to you, Will. Hey,
anytime we get to talk about kids and talk about Bruce Arena, I'm there. And we didn't even mention Jurassic Park. Oh man, we didn't want to make Taylor mad again. That's it. Yeah, you can save the Jurassic Park chat for next time you talk to Taylor. I'll give him a call. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, and have a good evening. All right, Daryl. We'll talk to you later. It's Taylor Rockwell on the phone. Hello. 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 So you won't have heard part one of today's show. No, I did. I was there. You were there? In the background. You couldn't see me. Yeah. All right. So then you know that Will Parchman and I had like a really good 25-minute conversation about the themes and meanings behind Jurassic Park. I mean, yeah, it was tough for me to bite my tongue. I'm not gonna lie. When you were like, maybe life doesn't find a way. Okay, that was tough. That was difficult. I mean, that's what the scientists believe for about the first third of the movie, right? Yeah, that doesn't go too well for them, though. We actually really did talk about USA Trinidad and no Jurassic Park. And I was not actually there. All of it was lies. All of it was lies. Not off to a great start. Thanks for jumping on the show on what was supposed to be your day off, though. I very much appreciate it. Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, it's tough to call it a day off. I'm still trying to finish this massive project in our backyard. So, like, you're catching me on the tail end of, like, 6 straight hours of manual labor. So it's tough to, like, think of that as, like, just a happy day off. Here's a view behind the curtain for Total Sock Show listeners. Taylor often tells me about the projects he's doing around his house, and I cannot even fake enthusiasm. I mean, I've actually ceased doing that since I think one time we went over to a friend's house. And, like, Daryl Grove, for those who don't know, is usually a very, like,
interested, involved person. I've never seen his eyes glaze over so fast as when home improvement projects come up. So I've just kind of quit talking about it. I keep them vague, and then like whenever you're around, you're like, "Oh, that's new," and I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing that."
Let's go talk about soccer. Well, let's do the same today. First up, Taylor, today's show is sponsored by our longtime sponsors, Ruffneck Scarves. Thank you to the fine people at Ruffneck Scarves.
Indeed.
We did a Twitter question, and the question was, if you were to design a custom Ruffneck Scarves scarf, which is a thing you can do at ruffneckscarves.com, and you were to design it to explain your current feelings about the US men's national team, what would that scarf look like? And
so,
you would not be surprised that there's a lot of Pulisic in the answers.
Well, see, this is my favorite thing about doing the Roughneck ones is, so Daryl and I both share the TSS Twitter account, and when I suddenly get like 36 notifications, and when I go to look at them and they're all sort of insane things, and I'm like, oh, it's a Roughneck question. Got it. All right, cool.
So people are just tweeting sort of random images that come into their head, right?
Exactly.
All right, well, we've picked up 6 responses. There were actually more good responses than we could use, but we couldn't do a whole show of just Ruffneck Scarves responses. Chose 6. First one comes from Jacob Warneke, and he wants Pulisic's tattoo, and that is it. So
it's a pretty good scarf.
The tattoo that Pulisic, or birthmark, we don't know, was showing off after he subbed out of the USA-Panama game, just that on a scarf. I'm assuming it would have to be placed horizontally.
Yeah, I think so. You'd have to drag it out. So it'd be kind of like a fat American eagle and a very long American flag. But that'd be fine.
An overfed American eagle.
Exactly. That's the nicer way to put it.
It was feeding on Panamanian centre-backs.
I mean, that's also a distinct possibility. I also enjoyed Megan Ritter's. She writes, Tim Howard swimming in TNT while making all the saves. I'm assuming that is a reference to the flooded track around the field.
You saw the photos, right?
I did.
I read someone's clever comment was that they saw what Pulisic did to Panama, so Trinidad built a moat around the stadium.
So, first of all, that's hilarious and accurate. Second of all, I saw a lot of people being critical of the U.S. players because most of the footage I saw was like the standing water and then video of the players being carried onto the field, like on the backs of other people.
Like soft tattooed millionaires.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that might be exhibits A through K.
Lallis and Wijnaldum would be splashing through their in their best boots, right, in the 90s.
Yeah, I'm assuming that has something to do with the footwear, right?
Yeah,
I'm assuming that once your entire foot is submerged in water, it makes for a less than effective training session.
Yeah, and an unpleasant one, and an uncomfortable foot for the rest of the day. It's a bad image. It's a weird image. It's kind of like when people used to throw their cloaks down for Queens back in muddy England. But I can see the logic behind it.
I can see the logic behind it, especially because I feel like generally speaking, they're wearing new shoes for U.S. national team games, usually new equipment as well, and new socks and the like, which leads to blisters. And if you're about to play a World Cup qualifier, a fairly important World Cup qualifier, you probably don't want your feet covered in blisters. I still think it's kind of a hilarious image, but it's worth noting that.
So we give Ali Bedoya a pass for having a piggyback.
I mean, always and forever.
Kenton Starler says, I know this much. My scarf will have Pulisic in the middle and not off on the right side if it wants me to be happy.
That's a good one.
That's a good tweet. That's a good tweet.
We've got more Pulisic coming. TJ Bramesh says, tattooed millionaires on one side, Wonder Boy on the other. Now, would that be Wonder Boy written out, or would that be like Wonder and then an image of Pulisic and then Boy?
I think the second one. Yeah,
I think so
that's
too.
Good graphic design you did there, Taylor.
I do my best.
I'm assuming this is a scarf that you basically flip around depending on how you're feeling about the team at that moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like that it's all entirely dependent on Christian Pulisic, apparently. But yeah.
Enabang Ephraim says, on one side, there'd be 1 foot in Russia. On the other side, there'd be 1 foot in Australia. This is, I assume, assuming that Australia win the pre-playoff against Syria.
The pre-playoff. That's well said.
It's a thing we haven't talked about, right? Is that if things do go wrong on Tuesday night, the US could be looking at a game against either Australia or Syria, and it's a whole extra headache we have to have.
This is true. That's why we're not going to worry about it, because we're just going to win and it will be fine. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it will be Australia. We'll know more tomorrow. If you're hearing this Tuesday, then you probably already know, because that game is at 5 a.m. Eastern time. And the final one comes from Marcus Aurelius. I'm guessing not the original Marcus Aurelius.
Not that one. Marcus Aurelius, not that one.
Yeah, not that one. Joy from Pixar's Inside Out on one side, fear from Inside Out on the other.
Have you seen this movie?
I have not seen Inside Out, and I know that's probably blasphemous to many of our listeners.
But you can't. I mean, it's as bad as not seeing Mighty Ducks. Except Inside Out is really, really good.
I think it's probably worse. So
you know the concept though, right? It's like the emotions inside someone's head are joy and fear. So that would make sense to flip it depending on... I think you could do that throughout a single game. You could just keep flipping it back and forth.
I know that was a quick summing up, but for a second, the way you explained that made it sound like legitimately the only two emotions you had in your head, Daryl, were joy and fear.
They are right now. So thank you to Jacob, Megan, Kenton, TJ, Enabang, and Marcus Aurelius, not that one, for those tweets. Thank you to everybody who tweeted us with their Ruffneck Scarves idea. The good news is there are lots of US national team scarves for sale at ruffneckscarves.com. And if you use the code Total Soccer Show, all one word, all uppercase, you can get 20% off any scarf you can find at ruffneckscarves.com. I might suggest, if the US qualifies, maybe buying a celebratory scarf.
Like maybe like a celebratory like TSS scarf, just to support your local podcast.
Or a TSS one. one.
Yeah, that works for me.
So Taylor, the other reason I called you up, not just to talk about scarves, there's a lot of Total Soccer Show Scouting Network reports that have come in. I think it's the international break, right? There's a lot of our guys on duty.
So should we get to a few of them, Mr. Grove?
There's some good ones. You mind if I go first?
I do not.
All right. Todd Ito is scouting Takefusa Kubo, the 16-year-old attacking midfielder / forward for Tokyo FC and Japan U17s, and previously the U20s. So we were expecting big things of Kubo, right, in this tournament, and so far he's delivering. Todd says Kubo got an assist and then a goal as Japan beat Honduras 6-1 in the U17 World Cup. Kubo's corner was headed in by teammate Kaito Nakamura, and later Kubo roofed it with his left foot from just outside the 6-yard box. Todd says he also showed excellent skill, dribbling in tight spaces and making quick passes and darting runs. Side note from Todd, the aforementioned Kaito Nakamura, who has number 13 for Japan, scored a first half hat-trick, and I think maybe this might be a guy we have to add to the scouting network in the very near future, Taylor.
I think that's probably how it works. A hat-trick at a youth tournament? Yeah, that seems like it fits in there.
It's the bona fides for the TSS scouting network.
A major youth tournament, I should add that, before we start getting 12-year-olds submitting their highlight reel. Clay Jenkins scouting Jadon Sancho, 17-year-old left-winger for Borussia Dortmund, and the reason why Daryl wooed that is because he's also with the England U17s.
Yeah.
Sancho scored a brace in England's 4-0 win versus Chile in the U17 World Cup. He scored in the 51st off of a tap-in from an uncleared cross, and then again in the 60th with a powerful low side foot curler into the far corner.
Yep. He also had a great assist, which was kind of dribble at the defence, and then he slipped a pass in for Callum Hudson-Odoi. So, do you know the story with Jadon Sancho in the U17 World Cup, Taylor?
I do not.
Dortmund are going to call him back after the group stage.
That seems mean.
It does. I'm going to try and find a way to stop that happening. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet. Some sort of like
maybe
chaining myself to a stadium.
Skip the winter break or something. Yeah. That's a good plan, Joe. Do that.
We'll call that Plan B.
But it's an easy way to explain England getting eliminated. Like if they get knocked out in the knockout round, you can be like, well, that's the problem. We needed him there.
Yeah.
Once in the future, then we'll win.
It's a ready-made excuse, right? Maybe it'll be like, well, he would have scored his penalty in the shootout.
Which is why I hear Gareth Southgate is already planning to have Tottenham recall Harry Kane next summer.
after the group stage.
Yeah, exactly. We just need him back to hang out.
All right, up next, Michael Heitman is scouting Herbert Omar Mejia Flores, a.k.a. Junior Flores, 21-year-old, position TBD, but likely attacking mid for Borussia Dortmund 2, the Borussia Dortmund U23s. It's been a while since we heard about Junior Flores, so I was really interested to read this one. Michael says, Flores is healthy, 3 exclamation marks. It's been a year and a half since he's been in a league game for Dortmund 2, but Dortmund 2 beat German second division team Arminia Bielefeld 3-1 in a friendly last Thursday, and Flores finally got on the field. He subbed on at right wing in the 75th minute and then scored in the 77th minute. So Dortmund 2 play an actual league game on Tuesday night versus FC Vegberg Beek, easy for me to say. And Michael says he'll report back on that when it happens. All he can hope for is that Flores makes the game day roster.
I'm going to be really bummed out when this scouting report overall ends with another one from Junior Flores about how he's gotten re-injured. Because I feel like that's something that is a distinct possibility.
I can confirm that this report does not end that way. At least not today. At least not today.
All right, well, then we'll get to some more. Ryan Marzak scouting Pione Sisto, 22-year-old attacker for Celta Vigo and Denmark. Sisto played in Denmark's 1-1 draw with Romania, which was enough to grab the Danes a World Cup playoff spot. He had 2 horrible, all caps, shots, one wide, one over, but also put in a cross that led to Bentner being fouled in the box and Christian Eriksen scoring the penalty.
So there you go. Denmark are in the playoff spots for the World Cup. And I'm Team Christian Eriksen. So
I had heard that.
I'm really hoping Denmark get there. I guess I have to see who they're drawn against before I start putting my hopes on anyone. But
well, I genuinely don't know how this works. So we'll have to do the follow up when we do our World Cup qualifier catch up recap
Thursday.
But as I recall, isn't it the top 4 seeds play the top the bottom 4 seeds, or are they going to do it by coefficient?
I actually don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Because I think Denmark are in the top 4, and I think Sweden are in the bottom 4. And that would be quite the drawing if it was Denmark versus Sweden in a playoff to get to the World Cups.
Is there any scenario where Eriksen gets transferred to England?
I mean, that could be difficult.
Also, I did take a look at the table. There's always an unlucky team, right? There's Slovakia, I think, are in 9th, and they finish second in their group, but don't make the playoffs, which I always feel like is really harsh.
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair. If only there were a format change coming out that would allow many more teams to make it in.
Okay, Gillian Avalon is scouting Jack Storer, the 19-year-old striker for Birmingham City, now on loan at Gloucester City AFC. You may not have heard of them, Taylor, and you're about to find out why. So Gillian says Baby Jack has officially now been loaned to Gloucester City AFC. This is a team in the Vanarama National League South. That's the 6th tier semi-professional in England. It's lower than his previous loan spell team. He's already played for Gloucester versus Braintree Town, which was a 3-1 loss. Can we just revel in the glory of the names of lower league English teams? Braintree Town.
I mean, yeah, that's phenomenal.
It's
Gloucester
great, right?
City. Also, tough for foreigners, but I'm sure it'll work out.
There used to be a podcast I listened to. I genuinely can't remember the name of it. It was on the Maximum Fun Network. And they used to have, it was a transatlantic quiz, right? So they had, a British team in England and an American team in America, and they would do the quiz that way. And they always had a round where you had to guess true or false. The Americans had to guess English lower league teams. They had to guess if it was made up or not. And the English people had to guess American minor league baseball teams. Was that made up or not? And it always led to hilarity.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I know some minor league teams, especially since we live in Richmond with the Flying Squirrels. So, yeah.
But can you imagine being told there's a team called Braintree Town? That you would never believe that that's true.
I mean, no, but you guys have got some weird names out there, and not everyone can be as cool as Blackpool. That's just made to be. That's just made to be awesome. But anyway, up the Tigers is what I have to say about Gloucester City AFC.
How do you know that?
I googled it very quickly while you were talking.
Taylor.
Vu Tran scouting Mahmoud Dahoud, 21-year-old midfielder for Dortmund and Germany's U21s. Dahoud scored against Azerbaijan in the UEFA European U21 Championship qualifying.
That's what we call it for short.
Yeah, indeed. Good Lord. It was a blazing run down the middle of the field, a quick dribble to his right, then a blast into the bottom left corner. Perhaps Dahoud will continue to show enough promise to be considered for the German senior team in time for the 2018 World Cup. I don't know. They're pretty threadbare, senior team.
Right, there's a lot of competition. I don't know if you saw this. Emre Can scored from about 500 yards today for Germany.
Outside of the stadium, you just boomed it in.
Yeah, I think it was.
Well done. I'm trying to get your name on the sheet. Sure.
Martin Reyes is scouting Herving Lozano, the 22-year-old Mexican winger for PSV and, of course, Mexico. Martin says Chucky, as he's known, came off the bench for Mexico and scored a 78th-minute equaliser in the eventual 3-1 World Cup qualifying win over Trinidad and Tobago last Friday. We saw this goal, didn't we, Taylor?
We did. It was Chucky time.
Chucky time, yeah.
Or Chucky time, excuse me.
He provided the comeback spark against what had looked like an inspired opponent up to that point. Mexican news has been quite positive on Lozano due to his stellar start at PSV, where he already has 6 goals and 4 assists in 8 games. Many believe his performance in this Mexico match earned him a starting spot for the national team. I'm surprised he's not a regular starter. How about you, Taylor?
I mean, yeah, other than that, it's Juan Carlos Osorio, and he has to do at least one thing every week that enrages Mexico supporters. So, can't be that
so
surprised.
much so that even being top of the hex, they still want him out.
I mean, I genuinely thought that there's probably somebody out there who's like, yeah, he's got 6 goals and 4 assists in 8 games, but it would be more if he were playing more. Fuera Sodio. That quickly. Michael Hartman scouting Josh Sargent, 17-year-old forward for the US U17s and 20s, and soon to be Werder Bremen. Josh drew a penalty in the box and drove it home to score the first goal in a 3-0 win over India in the first game of the U17 World Cup. On to Ghana. That one happened today.
Yeah, it did. So I already talked about that with Will earlier, in between, unpacking the themes of Jurassic Park, man versus science, all that sort of stuff. So, the US beat Ghana 1-0. But big thing for Sargent, just to get the US up and running with that first goal.
All right, but really, if you're going to do this, do you know that the best part about Jurassic Park is in the very beginning when he can't buckle the seatbelts?
No, is that sort of a blooper, kind of?
No, it's because... The premise being that when he's trying to fasten a seatbelt, it's only female to female, the seatbelt clickers,
Yeah.
And then he ends up tying it in a knot because that's him finding a way to make female and female work, and that's exactly what happens in Jurassic Park.
So we really are unpacking the themes of Jurassic Park here.
Hey man, if you're gonna bring that movie up, I'm gonna talk about it.
If we are gonna talk about this, that is still I love Jurassic Park, it's a great movie, but that is still my fundamental problem, is that life always finds a way is a bit like yada yada yada. You know what I mean?
How do you mean?
Because it still means that two females essentially find a way to create an offspring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I mean
they don't have access to science, these dinosaurs.
Well, first of all, do you remember how it happens? Because that's kind of important.
I don't. Oh, they have a thing? Okay.
Yeah, no, they explain it in the movie. And it comes from the books, and in the books, it's much more prevalent, the idea that it's the arrogant. It's not necessarily life finds a way completely. It's more so the arrogance of man thinking that he can replace, whomever in terms of the evolutionary process. So basically, it's that they use DNA from frogs to bypass the code a little bit or fill in the gaps, and they accidentally use a frog that can be hermaphroditic if the situation requires it.
Oh, that wasn't in the movie, though. I guess that would be a long, weird speech that someone would have to give to explain.
I think one of them says it really quickly. I think it's a throwaway line that you would probably not notice, but they say it fast. I can't remember if it's hermaphroditic or if they can just change their sex or if that's the same thing. But either way.
I also probably haven't seen the movie in 15 years, so...
Well, that's your mistake.
I might get on that. All right, so Ben Richards is scouting Efrain Alvarez, the 15-year-old midfielder for LA Galaxy 2 and currently Mexican youth national teams. He could still be persuaded. Ben says, after becoming the youngest ever player to sign for a USL squad earlier this year, Efrain Alvarez became the youngest ever participant in a USL game on Saturday night when he was subbed on at the start of the second half of LA Galaxy 2's match against Portland Timbers 2. 28 minutes later, Alvarez became the youngest ever player to record an assist in a USL game when he fired a free kick into the box for Jack McBean to head direct into the net. Los Dos went on to win 3-2, and it appears I will have to set up a command in Windows for the phrase, the youngest ever player, to make typing future scouting reports easier.
Always thinking ahead is Ben Richards.
Yeah.
Tom Gaffney scouting James Sands, 17-year-old number 6/center back for NYCFC and the US U17s. Daryl says this report was great, but also long, so he had to cut it down.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It was a really detailed report, and we've had to cut it down for length.
Alrighty, well, here we go. Sands was excellent as the US U17s beat Ghana 1-0 to go top of Group D. This was a big match for Sands because it's one of the few times we've seen him truly tested in that center back role. Remember, he's a defensive midfielder by trade. He showed tremendous 1v1 tackling, and he was good at stealing the ball off the foot of the attacker, getting it under possession, and going forward. He also showed excellent emergency defending, getting back on one occasion to rescue his keeper, who had been beaten clean. All this despite losing seemingly half his blood on the sideline as team physios attempted to stanch his bleeding for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, he had a nose, blood pouring out of his nose.
That sounds broken. Manager John Hackworth had substitutes available, but decided Sands was too important to the defensive effort to replace, which seems like a compliment of sorts to Sands' talents.
Do you remember that the big thing going into this tournament was that we're not sure if we can keep playing these defensive midfielders at centre-back? So for Sands to give a proper centre-back performance is really exciting.
I'm guessing face mask next game?
Could be.
Yeah.
Oh, if TSS listeners want to hear more about the U17 World Cup, is there another podcast out there featuring Taylor Rockwell where they could do that?
No, I don't think so. Yes, there is. There's the Top Drawer Soccer Show. Tomorrow will be myself and Mr. Travis Clark reviewing the two victories we mentioned for the U17s, the victory over India and then the one this morning over Ghana. We'll talk a little bit more about the U17 World Cup as well in general.
And should be looking ahead to the final group stage game against Colombia.
Sure.
Jonathan Holgram is scouting Alex Iwobi, the 21-year-old winger/forward with Arsenal and Nigeria. All right, how about this for a scouting report? Iwobi scored the goal that secured Nigeria's World Cup qualification. How about that? It was the only goal in a 1-0 win over Zambia, making Nigeria the first African team to secure qualification for Russia. Last week, Iwobi also started his first Premier League match of the season, scoring the second goal in Arsenal's 2-0 win over Brighton. Iwobi's back,
decent.
Taylor. Iwobi's back.
That's a decent report. That's so exciting that both of my dogs came downstairs just to hear more about it. So that's good to know. Ed Dahoud scouting Federico Bernadeschi, 23-year-old attacking midfielder for Juventus and Italy. Fede, as apparently he's known, came off the bench a little less than 30 minutes before the end of Italy's uninspiring 1-1 tie with Macedonia. In the 81st minute, he collected the ball in his defensive half, dribbled to just above the 18, and hit a left-footed shot just wide of the far post, Italy's best chance to go ahead. He did not play in Italy's 1-0 win over Albania today.
Actual breaking news, it was disappointing, says Ed.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got a little confused there.
So, yeah, Italy, I think, are in the playoff spots as well. They're confirmed in a playoff spot, right? They are not going directly to Russia.
They are not. I think they have the second most points of any second-place team, which would put them in the top half, but whether or not that matters remains to be seen.
We'll have this down by the time we record our World Cup roundup, though, right?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Penultimate report of the day is American, and the final one will be American. Andrew Baird is scouting Josh Perez, the 19-year-old American winger at AS Livorno on loan from ACF Fiorentina. Andrew says, since being loaned to third-tier Livorno, Perez has been in the matchday squad for all 6 and made 3 appearances, all as a sub, for a total of 45 minutes of playing time. I'm going to give that a meh, right? According to the Fiorentina SB Nation page, in an article that's all about sort of checking up on their Lone Stars, they say Perez seems to be settling in well enough. He's operating on the left wing rather than his preferred right, so his natural instinct to cut inside is rather limited. However, we remain very optimistic about him. It's a good nurturing spot for the diminutive attacker from LA, and we think his influence in Leghorn will grow as the season wears on. Why Leghorn? Andrew asked. Because apparently Livorno used to be called Ligorno, and British writers used to mispronounce it as Leghorn. Yay, British people. Mispronouncing things all over the world.
Hey, Daryl, you want to know something important?
What's that?
Diminutive means small.
Does You're it welcome. Really? I did not know that.
Sean Dickey scouting Weston McKennie final report, 19-year-old central midfielder for FC Schalke. Weston McKennie is definitely not a striker! ! Schalke's Twitter posted a video from Kickbox, a YouTube channel where Bundesliga footballers challenge the host of the show, Fabi, to FIFA-like skills challenge where you shoot at stacks of boxes. McKennie lost that challenge 1-5. That's not good.
He took it with his traditional smiley face, but you could tell he was not happy at all about losing this challenge.
I mean, I imagine not. Weston seems to... Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
So the challenge was, it was a goal, and then there were literally like giant shoeboxes stacked either side of the goal, and you kind of had to like blast the ball and try and take out... The best thing seemed to be to take out the bottom shoebox and collapse the whole thing, and McKennie kept missing.
That's not good.
No.
Bruce Arena is going to see that video, and that's what's going to keep him off that roster.
He's a huge kickbox fan.
I mean, that's what I've heard. Weston seems to be settling very well, concludes Sean Dickey in Germany, as he just leased his first apartment, and it looks like he's gotten a tattoo that is normally hidden under his match kit.
Yeah, so it's on his forearm. There's a tattoo. I could see it in the video.
He's growing up. He's getting an apartment. He's getting tattoos.
Didn't this kind of blow your mind? Like, because he's playing first-team football in the Bundesliga, I think of him as an adult. But even 19 is actually quite young to lease your first apartment, right?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so it just seemed... I don't know, it was one of those... It was like a reminder of how young he was, essentially, hearing him say that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to assume he had some help leasing that apartment, because I feel like clubs tend to help out with that.
He didn't just go on like the German equivalent of Craigslist.com.
I mean, I would hope not, but then again, he lost this shootout 1-5, so maybe he doesn't have the best common sense, who knows?
So, thank you to the many people who sent in scouting reports today. I'm going to do it, Ted. I'm going to do it. Thank you to Todd, Clay, Michael, Ryan, Gillian, Vu, Martin, Michael, Ben, Tom, Jonathan, Ed, Andrew and Sean, it was too many. I couldn't do it. It was too many, but I tried. Thank you to everyone.
You regret your decisions?
I do regret my decisions.
All right.
Thank you for sending in your scouting reports. I made some recent scouting assignments. There should be lots of new people out there with new scouting assignments. If you've already joined the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, don't have a scout, please email me, Daryl, Daryl, at totalsoccershow.com. Send me an email and just tell me that you want your scout now. I will get it to you this week. I promise. And
that sounds good to me.
And if you'd like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, what's the URL, Taylor? Let's see if you can remember it.
I believe it's totalsoccershow.com/join.
Correct. Good job.
Nailed it.
Good job, buddy.
That's what I'm here for, bud. That's what I'm here for.
All right, Taylor, thank you.
to reiterate things like a parrot. That's what I do best.
Well, we're about to do it again because thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. Taylor and I will be back tomorrow evening to review USA versus Trinidad. Fingers crossed, Taylor. Fingers crossed.
Fingers and toes. And also other fingers and other toes. Many things crossed.